So looks like we are live. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Mirella, and together with Anil and the support of Victoria, we co-organize these events. For this summer, it's every week. From autumn on, we're going to see, depending on speaker interest. We have here tonight with us Elvira, who's product owner at Siilo, and Noelle Ghanem, product design lead at Medicus.ai. And I think the best person to introduce Elvira is Elvira, so I'm going to hand this over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mirella. Okay, so let me start my presentation. I will share my screen and I will put my slides full screen. So do you guys see it? Is everything all right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Cool. So let me start my presentation. And first, let me introduce myself. My name is Elvira Romashkina. I'm a product manager at Siilo. I'll tell you what Siilo is a bit later. And today I'd like to talk about working with user feedback. And I'd like to look at it from the healthcare perspective, where I've been working in for the past 2 years already. And now to the question, what is actually Siilo? We are a secure end-to-end encrypted messenger, so healthcare professionals can efficiently communicate and collaborate with each other. It's important to note here that we don't offer communication with patients. On our platform, only medical workers chat with each other. One of our biggest values for our users is that we are secure by design and compliant. We have some healthcare specific features. We have fast, sleek, and reliable native apps for both iOS and Android. We are also present on web as a web version. Our main market is the Netherlands and Belgium. And Siilo as a company is based here in the Netherlands in Amsterdam, where I'm actually speaking from. So I'm saying hi to you from Amsterdam. We are a very small company. We are no more than 30 people. And we are also very young. It's about 5 years old. So here is my plan for the presentation today. We'll first start by talking about why user feedback is actually useful for product management. We'll take a look at some insights into healthcare that I've been learning during this time, during my experience with Siilo, which I feel are very important to be aware of when working in the field. We'll then come to see some practical methods that are applicable not only in healthcare, but also in some other industries. And as one of the biggest organic channels for user feedback is support, we'll take a look at that specifically. I want to also look at the current trends in healthcare, which I and my users see nowadays. And I'll end up with key takeaways that I'd like you to take with you after my presentation. So, why user feedback is useful? To build successful products, we need to make sure we address users' biggest pains and needs in the product. And for that, we need to understand them. And out of 2 classical types of data that we usually work with, which is qualitative data and quantitative data, I feel that at companies' early stages, qualitative data can be more beneficial. And this is exactly how we had it at Siilo. Why it is like that? So first of all, it's much easier to get qualitative data. You can just go out and reach out to your users and just talk to them by applying some specific practices for user interviews, etc., as opposed to implementing events, building data warehouse, running some scripts, making sure you analyze data properly. So this seems more difficult. Also, on companies' early stages where you don't really have a lot of users, there is not always enough quantitative data for statistically significant insights. So sometimes it's just not worth it to run some experiments or things like that. And another important thing is that quantitative data is applicable mostly when we want to improve what already exists in the product. But if we are seeking for some new ideas, if we want to innovate, so to bring something new, we need to get those ideas from somewhere else. Another point which is interesting is that in healthcare, it's difficult to put yourself in users' shoes. For example, when I worked in Yandex Taxi, which is a Russian Uber, we had a passengers app and a drivers app. We are all taxi passengers. We also had a special budget for specifically using Yandex Taxi. For product managers who worked with driver app, we had a special car branded with the Yandex Taxi colors waiting for us at the parking space in our work building. And everybody could just take it and go and try earn some money working as a taxi driver with the help of our app. So in healthcare, apparently it's not possible to just try and become a doctor for a couple of days. And another reason is that we are dealing here with highly confidential patient information. That's why it's not possible to share it with people from outside. So how do we actually get the data then? How do we actually understand our users? Before we come to answering this question, I'd like us to first understand some healthcare specifics, which are actually main requirements that this industry brings us with. And first thing that I already mentioned is that data privacy is key here. We are dealing with patient information, and moreover, it is critical to ensure that the data is delivered successfully. For example, at Siilo, we had a case when users relied on Siilo to manage their duties, and they used push notifications to get notified about some critical information about patients. So we should be very careful, and we need to choose the most reliable technologies to make sure we support and to support those needs, and we encrypt our data properly. We don't store it on our servers, and we make sure our apps are resilient. Another interesting point is that healthcare is highly regulated. There are lots of different industry regulations. For example, in the UK, we have NHS Code of Governance. This is just an example. There are lots of other things in other countries as well. Moreover, medical workers work using standardized guidelines, and it is very rare when they have an exceptional case which goes beyond these guidelines. And this brings me to the point that this industry is country dependent. We have different healthcare systems and the ways healthcare systems operate. For example, here in the Netherlands, we have very strict healthcare levels. A patient first needs to go to a GP, and only if they receive a referral, they can go to a medical specialist. I know that in Germany, for example, it's not like that. People can just go to a medical specialist right away. Because of that, it's hard to scale products internationally. We need to re-evaluate product market fit at a country, in each country, and we need to focus on deep localization. So having said and described how industry is regulated, we come to this conclusion and this learning that I'd like to share. Usually in healthcare, institutions are the ones who choose which software to use. So doctors are, so they have no choice. They use whatever the organizations tell them to use. These products not always satisfy end users. And the trick here is by when staying secure and compliant by default, we need to try and add some value and provide a user with outstanding experience so we can delight them. And with that, let's look at some practical methods on how can we gather user feedback and how can we talk to our users in the field. It is very important to constantly be in direct contact with users, as I already said. First practice is user interviews and research. We need to do it regularly, and we can use this practice for either researching their general experience or exploring some specific area or a specific problem. At Siilo, we are lucky to have real practicing doctors in-house, and we are actually founded by a doctor, a surgeon. They help us to better understand the field and to break the communication barriers. It's also very, very useful to involve users in prototype and beta testing. This helps to validate UI and UX of chosen solutions and to gather more focused feedback. And the only touch point we have is when we are patients ourselves. So you're no longer just simply a patient. You observe how doctors work, how they communicate with each other, how they treat you, to understand them better. And the learning here that I'd like to share is that actually users are really willing to help. It's very easy to find people who want to share their knowledge, participate in research, and taking into account how users are highly educated and skilled and motivated to improve their workflows. It's really insightful to have them think along with you. One method that I've implemented at Siilo that I find useful is this tagging system that helps me to handle feedback that I get through one of the biggest channels for user feedback, which is usually support. And this is a classical kind of approach to work with that, but I'd like to first cover what it is and then share some additional things to pay attention to so that it works properly. So what is it? We need to come up with the list of tags that cover all aspects of our product that we find important. And then we need to tag every user interaction with one of these tags. We need to incorporate this to support process. Then we need to regularly look at the tags overview, sorted by percentage of usage. And so this is the example. You see the list of the tags. I actually have much more, around 30. And there is an example of a user asking something about where he can add his picture for the profile. And we are tagging this with profile. It is important to integrate all existing channels. These channels are usually these ones. At Siilo, we have a specific in-app channel, a Team Siilo chat, which is our main channel for requests for support. And as a messenger ourselves, we are lucky to have a very nice channel to also chat, to also approach our users. So this is how I chat with them and ask for some information that I need. These channels can also be emails, incoming calls, web widget on the website, or live chat on the website, all kinds of social networks, app store reviews, Some products also offer support in instant messengers, like WhatsApp, for example. And one of the funny examples is Google Maps. Even we have some reviews on Google Maps, but there are apparently products that have it more relevant for them. So the trick is to try and incorporate as many channels as you can. As a ticketing system for handling support tickets, at Siilo we use Zendesk plus our own in-house platform, which we build to handle these Team Siilo requests. As example of social networks, I put Facebook and Twitter. These are supported by Zendesk. And there is another one, Freshdesk, which is a leader on the market. WhatsApp is also supported by both. And this is how I'd like to demonstrate this tagging system in practice. We once noticed that the profile tag persisted on top of the list for quite some time. And after digging into what users say, we found out that they simply can't find their profile. They wanted to do it for some of their own tasks, like set an avatar, change an email, or update their profession. Or we ourselves asked them to do something in their profile, for example, to fix a typo that they made in their emails, and they struggled to find it. We decided to put a profile on the dedicated tab. Previously, it was hidden behind 2 steps, and we hoped that it would make it more discoverable and noticeable. And actually, it was a success. After 2 weeks, 2 weeks after launch, we've noticed that we had 75% less tickets with the profile tag. And there was a significant decrease of questions about where to find the profile. And it also helped us to achieve these results. We had less burden on support. They didn't need to deal with this question so often. We also provided a better user experience. And as this is what happened mostly on early stages of user journey with Siilo, we also managed to engage them better. And as they were willing to provide more information about themselves, this made the network healthier. So this also engaged other users as a side effect. Another example of using tagging system is making information about the product more useful. For example, we noticed that users asked a lot about system requirements to run Siilo. They especially asked about Internet Explorer, which is one of the most popular browsers in healthcare. And they asked about Android Go also often for some reason. We understood that they researched not only for themselves, but also for their teams, for their organizations. So this made it much more important to provide the relevant response. And after we added the response to frequently asked questions on the website, we managed to decrease the load. So 2 main learnings here from the usage of the tagging system of this kind. It is very important to stay in context with what users say regularly. And ideally, you would involve not only product managers, but the whole company. We actually share tags overview every week on our all hands meetings. And another thing to keep in mind is that this tagging makes support heavier. So for each ticket, you will need to take an additional step and add a tag. So this must be worth it. And now I'd like you to zoom out a bit, and I'd like to share with you some things that users share with me during the sessions, and we can look at where we are in healthcare to have some food for thought for future. So apparently healthcare is striving for digital innovation, and it especially became clear after the Corona crisis. we now understand that it is impossible to switch to fully remote work, but patients will definitely be treated remotely more and more often. We already have lots of tasks done with the help of phone calls, and we are in need for secure and compliant tools for communication with patients that are just more convenient, more modern. And two challenges that I see here are the adoption by medical workers, because they are not really excited about the fact that patients will be able to reach out to them whenever they want. They are a bit hesitant about this idea. And another challenge is that there can be multiple tools, and this will prevent scaling of the paradigm, because people won't know which tool to use to talk to which hospital, for example. And to make patients' treatment remotely work, we also need some tools for monitoring patient states remotely. Another big thing in the industry that became clear is that doctors need to share knowledge instantly in different dimensions, between institutions, between different specialties, between healthcare system levels, nation and worldwide even, because this was what our platform was used for when countries who were waiting for the peak of Corona wanted to get some information from countries who already experienced that peak. And they need better communication for that. And I'd like to finish my presentation with key takeaways. So especially in healthcare, it is very important to stay close to users and to request and handle the feedback to understand them better. It is very easy to get this feedback, but it might be tricky to handle it properly. And some processes established can help in that enormously. We don't need to forget and ignore one of the biggest organic channels for feedback, which is support. And as an example, tagging system that I just demonstrated can help us to make use of it. And with that, I'd like to end my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Do you have any questions or thoughts?
Thanks a lot, Elvira. There's already a question in the chat from Valentin Klein. He says, what tools are you using to collect feedback from support?
So we use two tools, and this was actually a challenge for us. We use Zendesk for channels like emails, web widget on the website, and incoming calls. And for this channel that I showed, which is inside our app, we use our own in-house system that we built ourselves, where we respond to our users through this Team Siilo chat. And my challenge was to integrate these two platforms and use one list of tags for both of them. Did I answer your question?
Valentin, could you comment if this answered your question?
And meanwhile, I can quickly go next. So, nice decision, thank you. What is your business model? Do you see your product as a two-sided platform serving patients and healthcare personnel? So this is a very interesting question. We are indeed a free tool available for everyone in stores, but we also have a B2B tool for healthcare organizations, so they can manage their workers. And there are some additional features that are actually paid. For example, they can send broadcasts to the whole organization or maybe to some specific departments. They can organize and manage groups, etc., etc. So this is our current business model. We sell this B2B tool, and we hope that we benefit from that because we acquire users of this newly added associations. Do you see your product as a two-sided platform serving patients? as it is becoming a trend, we are considering, this is just one of our ideas, and yeah, I don't have anything more specific to add to that. Gaurav, thank you. And Mohammed, what do you mean of organic channels you used? By organic channel, I mean support. When people ask about your product, they don't understand something or they want to learn how to use it. So this is already a sign that something can be better. We can improve it that way that they don't need to ask, they don't need to request this information from support. And also often users share their feature requests or just some ideas, or it becomes clear what they want from the questions they ask. For example, they ask whether the platform can do this or that. And even if it cannot, you understand that this is what they mean, and this is what they want. So this is exactly what I meant by organic channel. Given that your target audience may span different age groups, how do you appeal to this broad audience? Yes, exactly. We have a very broad age range. We have people in training who didn't become real doctors yet. They are still training, and we have some really experienced doctors. But to be honest, we don't do anything specific. We make our product so that it serves regardless of your age, because our goal is to satisfy the whole audience. We look more into some other characteristics. For example, there are different professions that we are dealing with. They can be medical specialists, nurses, dentists, physiotherapists, and this is one of the examples of a dimension to segment them, not the age actually, and not the gender. Okay, how do you deal with the different IT systems, data models, and or standards used in healthcare by hospitals, pharmacies, etc.? Oh yeah, by the way, sorry, I just wanted to add to the previous question. So at Siilo, we decided that as our users are fed up with using this software built in 90s, like Windows 95 style, we wanted to make their experience really outstanding. And we wanted to be playful so that we kind of help them to adopt yet another tool. So we incorporated emojis a lot to our communication style. You can see here on this slide that we use emojis. This is for real. We use them a lot. So we are using this symbol of the new generation, even when talking to experienced doctors. And I think it actually helps. We had some reviews, very nice reviews about that. Different IT systems. Yes, it's also a good question. There are, I think you mean electronic healthcare records, which are the main software used in every organization. And here in the Netherlands, we have like around 10 main systems used by first level of healthcare, and we have around 4 or 5 used by hospitals, which is the second level. And we don't integrate with them yet because this is a hassle and we don't want to spend our resources there. But we always try to find some workarounds how to provide our users with the possibility to add some information to this EHR and to maybe just get it. So currently they use our tool next to these IT systems. And the standards that we are fully compliant with are all security standards. So this is something that we pay close attention to. What were the data privacy laws did your team have to navigate? How did that affect your product decisions? Oh, yes. So first of all, it is GDPR, of course, but this is not a healthcare specific thing. We are compliant with that fully. And this is actually what dictate us the requirements for product decisions. Let me think of another good example for that. Yeah, so I think a good example here might be the following. So we have this Siilo Connect tool, and every company, every organization might have their additional requirements. And they are also, as I already said, they are different per country. So in Siilo Connect, we have some settings, like, for example, some company wants to have a PIN code when you enter Siilo. Some others have some additional requirements, like, for example, they don't want their users to be able to create groups themselves. And we are sometimes dealing with these feature flags, like if a user belongs to this association, then yes, as they should comply with this organization's rules, we switch this feature on for them. But it's not like we find it's valuable for all the user base. So other users might not have it. They can enjoy other functionality. So this is our approach here. How many potential users did you research before starting development? So I have a group of like maybe 5-6 users in average, something like that. Sometimes less, sometimes more. Because when we are exploring a broader area, we can talk with a bigger group. If we add just a very quick tweak for the design, for the UI, for example, we cannot even do any research before, but we will just test the prototype with them right away. Does data sent via the Siilo app get prioritized over other messenger apps? So what do you mean here, Gaurav? Do you mean these channels for incoming feedback? Like if the feedback comes from the Siilo app, comparing to the feedback coming from other channels? If yes, then no, it doesn't get prioritized. The priority of all the channels is the same. So this is the idea, like kind of get the average feeling by merging all kinds of channels together. Yeah, I think I've answered all of them. Sorry for the speed. I was worrying that
These are very good answers, and thanks everyone for having so many questions. This is awesome. And now you can hang on, and then we are going to have the breakout session after Noelle's talk and Q&A, and then you can ask more questions to Elvira. So now, Noelle, without further ado, over to you.
Thank you, Elvira. I really like that you gave concrete examples, and thank you, Mirella and product people very much for this. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'll also share the presentation later with you because it's a Google Slides. Can you see my screen, Mirella? Can you confirm, please?
Yes, confirming.
Thank you.
All good.
Thank you. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about something that I've never spoken to about with anyone, and it's what most PMs won't tell you. And it's something that I've kept to myself. And there are things that I learned from my experience and that worked maybe in my case, maybe not in yours. And I'd be interested in hearing your opinions. So please feel free to disagree with me and let me know, and then we can have the discussion and the conversation later. So I'm Noelle. I'm right now a product design lead at Medicus.ai. I started my journey working in advertising, specifically at Ogilvy as a copywriter. And then I moved to Rome in Italy, where I worked in a fashion magazine, completely different industries all across my career. And then I moved to London and I worked at Google, on Google My Business specifically, which is where you enter the name of a business and then you see the opening hours, the pictures, and all of that. And then to a smaller company called LDC, the local data company, also in London. And they were also working on Google Maps with Google. And then I moved to Berlin and worked at Ada Health. And if you live in Berlin, you've probably heard of Ada. You've seen the adverts also on the U-Bahn. And I was a product designer at Ada Health. And it's a medical chatbot where you put your symptoms. And after asking you 20 questions, it will give you around approximately three conditions of what you might have. And it would link you to a doctor sometimes, so it depends on your area and the country. And now I'm working at Medicus.ai, and I'll tell you about it in the next slide. I also co-founded two startups, The Bridge, which is to find jobs for people in the creative and tech industry around the world. It's still on, still working. It's based in Brazil. And FoodSwap, which is like Tinder, but for food, where it's to avoid food waste and all of that. It's where you take a picture of your food, and then just like Tinder, you swipe left or right, and then if it's a match, then you can either go eat with someone or exchange that meal. And it was part of OpenIDEO. If you've heard of IDEO before, the global design agency, then he was part of OpenIDEO. And I've also worked on a side project that is called Tibili, that is for the distribution of medicine in sub-Saharan African countries. So my journey with health is mainly Ada, Medicus, and Tibili. But for product design, it was a little bit everywhere, mainly starting from Google. Okay, so about Medicus.ai. Medicus.ai has multiple products. It's not just one product, it's a whole ecosystem. They're most famously known, they're famous for their smart reports. It's basically, if you're like me and you don't understand at all when you receive your lab reports, and you don't understand what it means if you have like 8% cholesterol, I don't even know if I'm saying something right or not. If you're like me and you don't understand it at all, then this tool is gonna help you. You basically take a picture of your lab results, it extracts the information from it, and then it changes it or visualize it into an infographic. The second product that we have is a pregnancy app. And in the pregnancy app, you can track your pregnancy, you can monitor your pregnancy, you can book appointments, all pregnancy related things. And the next tool that we have is called Smart Assist, and it's for healthcare professionals, for doctors. And it's to help the doctor during their diagnostic journey. And they'll be able to enter patient information, then symptoms, so the symptoms of the patient. It will suggest conditions, potential conditions based on machine learning, and also suggest tests and procedures that they can order or that they can document in terms of like the results that are impacting the condition. So they can, the results can also define which condition you have. We are 144 people right now at Medicus, 48 in product and tech, and 46 in medical and research. And all our medical content is based on medical standards, and we're following all the regulatory as well laws that exist. And we have offices in Austria, Germany, France, China, the United Arab Emirates, Lebanon, and Syria. So my role at Medicus is actually quite an unusual role, and for me it's important to highlight it because I've never seen that before. And when my manager spoke to me first before joining Medicus, I really liked the idea. So he basically said that he wants the product manager, the product owner, to be the product design lead. So the product design lead can have a product designer, but like in his team or her team, but the product design lead is the product owner. And I was like, oh, wow, like that's actually really interesting. And I would really be interested in that because I also was really interested in strategy and business. And I've always had also this side of my brain on strategy. And so for me, it was like living the dream, and I was really excited for this role. So in my first 60 days at Medicus, I started learning as much as possible, learning the names of my colleagues, learning about the company, learning about the history, and learning specifically also the medical jargon. Even though I did work in healthcare, working at Medicus for me was completely different because they dealt with lab tests And I didn't have a background in molecular biology or anything like that. So whenever they would talk to me about anteriority biomarkers and things like that, I would not understand a word. So it was a little bit challenging for me, but I quite enjoyed the journey. The second one is my manager just gave me a practical task and to discover the product. And it was instantly hands-on, which I also really enjoyed. I also, in my first 2 weeks, I actually traveled. They sent me traveling, meeting stakeholders in Switzerland and Vienna, and it was meeting with Roche as well. So I was really, really happy. It was great. And then they asked me to draft a roadmap. And then the part that excited me the most was I've had experience working at Google in Agile and how things like the dynamic and at Ada as well. And I was like, okay, great. Like it's a startup here. They don't really have like the proper methodology yet. So I'm going to restructure the way I've worked before. And we're going to see like how my team, we're going to test it with my team, see how they feel about it. So I changed their 1 sprint planning into a 2-week sprint planning. I've put the retro, I've changed the estimation from hours, they used to use hours, from time to points. And I also organized the backlog so that they can see also the vision of the product, so that they can see what is happening next, so that they don't work only on sprint 1. So I had sprint 1, and then I created sprint 2 so that they can always see what is coming next. And they have also a bigger vision of like what's in Q2. So I was quite proud about what I've done. And then it all went into smoke. So the contract stopped, or we had to pause it actually in order to figure out other things. And that team, everybody went to other teams, and we went back to the way we were working before I joined Medicus, which meant that we went back to receiving product requirements or anything like that, or client stakeholder requirements via email. They started using Google Sheets again to track everything, to track the product progression. And they started using Trello as a Kanban board, which is nothing. There's nothing wrong with all of this. It's just that I was so proud of what I've done that I felt a little bit sad and a little bit, I don't know. It was just not a nice feeling. And then the deadlines were really tight, and I just had like deadlines after deadlines after deadlines for no particular reason, but like we kept on having deadlines. So then I realized that actually the reason why I was unhappy or a little bit like sad is because I wasn't happy because the things didn't go the way I wanted them to go. But actually it was working well for Medicus. It was working well. The engineers were delivering. It was working just fine. And indeed, when coronavirus happened, in 2 weeks, we managed to deploy an app that is called Coviv in order to take a risk assessment, monitor your symptoms, and also receive your lab results. And we managed to CE market all of that in 2 weeks. Now, the reason why we managed to CE market in 2 weeks is because we've done it before. So we had the experience of how to do it with the Medicus app. And now, for example, Etihad Airways, as well as other clients, are using it. So Etihad is using it now to scan their passengers before they go on the plane. So my first lesson was find your own Agile. And textbook Agile doesn't always work. So don't follow a method just because you're used to it. And just because it worked for others, it doesn't mean it works for you. So in the last 3 months, I created 3 products, which for me was a little bit insane, but also great. So they found their own Agile. It wasn't working the way I've always worked, but it's working. So why not? So if you find your own Agile, don't think that because you're not following the Agile manifesto, or you're not following a specific way of working that you've heard of in presentations or like in talks or in textbooks or anything like that, don't think that you're doing something wrong. But what does that also mean? So if you do deliver 3 products in 3 months, somewhere you're sacrificing something. And indeed, so we were sacrificing the design, and we were sacrificing, of course, user research. So we don't manage to do as much user research. But something that my manager told me, he said, Noelle, stop designing. And for me to hear stop designing as a product designer, I was like, what? Like, there's no way I'm going to stop designing. And it took me around 2 months to understand the stop designing. I mean, I understood what he meant, but it was hard to implement or to actually do, because if I didn't give developers enough work or enough material for them to create the product, then they would ask for more. And if I would give a lot, then they would go very much into the details, and we wouldn't be able to deliver in the time frame of doing 3 products in 3 months. And also, I haven't written a user story since March. I've written, and it might look absolutely mental and crazy for you, especially if you're used to working like properly agile and all of that. But I've written the title and I've written acceptance criteria, and I'm going to touch point on other things as well that I've done that worked for me without having to follow a strict methodology, but our own methodology. And so in healthcare specifically, choose functionality over prettiness. And the functionality, the tool for it to be functional is much more important. Doctors and the healthcare system are used for things to not be super pretty. And actually, if they are really pretty, especially in B2B, then they will think that it's a gimmick, which is just it's an insight that I got from user interviews, actually, funnily enough, at ADA from doctors. And so I would definitely go for functionality over prettiness. The second thing that I thought was also absolutely mental, and you'll probably react like this as well now, is that the system is designed in a way to reduce the engineering and medical complexity. So actually medical software are not actually designed with the user in mind, which is maybe why they're saying that healthcare needs product managers, healthcare needs product designers. But actually, there's a reason why those systems are designed that way. The medical information is huge, and the engineering complexity as well. So in order to structure all this data and to create a system that functions, it's true that the system will have to be designed to reduce the engineering and medical complexity. And one thing actually that happened recently is that we were developing a product, one of the 3 products that I am not allowed to disclose because it's not fully out yet or announced. But we had to build it for scale because we had 2 choices. Either we build we build this product and then build a similar-ish one for different use cases, or we build one product where we make it quite generic and quite scalable. And in order to do that and to make it generic and scalable, we had to think about engineering and medical complexity and not about the user. But the reason why Mekram, my manager, decided to have a product designer as a product owner was because he knew that this was going to happen. And he wanted that whenever we will think of the engineering and medical complexity, the product owner that has a background in product design will automatically think of the journey on the interface. So the third one, also, I'm coaching a lot my manager today, but he's been great so far. And he said, design horizontally rather than vertically, which, and he's right. And it's not something new, but it's something that is good to be reminded of. So design horizontally as in design the flow, design how it's going to go and give this, rather than vertically and focusing on the little nitty-gritty details on the screen. And then my colleague, Kai, told me always wireframe for show. And why did he say that? Because we were in a meeting one day together on Google Meet, and we were brainstorming, and then I sketched something like on the side on my notebook, and I sketched what we were discussing about, and he was doing the same thing, and I didn't expect him to ask me to show him. And then I showed him my wireframes, and this was my wireframe, but I didn't expect to show it to anyone. I thought it was just for myself. Whereas his was more like this. This isn't his specifically, but it was more like that. And so he told me always wireframe for show. And he's right, because if you wireframe for show, then you're always ready to show it to someone. The third one is have more trust in the business strategy. And I know when you hear this, have more trust in the business strategy, your eyes might open and you might be completely like, oh no, like the business strategy, like why some businesses don't even have a business strategy. The reason why is because actually the raw unfortunate truth that maybe no one will actually tell you is that business strategy alone in healthcare can win out without user empathy. And for me to say that as a product designer, as someone that also is involved in Open Idea, which is a human-centered, that use the methodology of human-centered design, it was really hard to admit this. But for me, at least, I'm convinced that it's true for now. The business strategy alone can win out without user empathy. Maybe it's more common in B2B, and I will explain why with a concrete example. So what is mostly important is the product market fit. And user research insights will go in the product market fit. So will be part of it, but isn't like the main thing. And the reason why a lot of startup ventures and companies, recently, like small companies, startup ventures in healthcare failed, and you've seen a lot that failed, is because they didn't focus on the product market fit. So what they did is they identify a patient need or a doctor need or hospital need, and the foundation of their product was a user need, which that's what you hear as a theory. That's how it's supposed to be, right? Like that's what I learned. That's what I was taught. And you base yourself on a real problem, on a need. And so most startups are actually the foundation is a patient need, and then this creates a cool product, like a product that is nice, a product that is cool, a product that gets press if you want, but then it doesn't last for more than 2 or 3 years. What actually works is if you find the product market fit. And one of the examples is the electronic health records. So electronic health records are international. You have them in almost every country, maybe to a certain different level of complexity or advanced. And health records, I don't know one doctor that tells me I love my electronic health record software. They all don't particularly like it, so the user empathy is low, but it's still there. After years and many, many years, electronic health records are still there. There was a product market fit. And that for me it was just a new insight in my head. And so business strategy alone can win out without user empathy at first, and you can always build on top of it user empathy. So do not disregard it. And 4, continuously talk with your stakeholders. And I think Elvira also mentioned something similar, that always you involve all the company, and you got feedback from, and you also got feedback from everyone in the all hands meeting. So continuously talk with your stakeholders. Why? Because in healthcare, your stakeholders are the key success of your product. So don't only show them the demo, let them be involved. And when I was working at Ada, I had the chance to work across all teams. And one of the teams was the client integration team. And it's true that as a client integration team, you face more stakeholders and external stakeholders and clients. But what I realized, and the difference that I realized with this team, they were doing better for me, in my opinion, than other teams, because they had a weekly check-in with stakeholders, whether they were internal or external. They had this weekly check-in where they would get feedback. They would get also news and updates on like where we're at with the products and where the client's at in their mind as well. So we would understand better. And also there's an overwhelming number of stakeholders in healthcare, but they all have their own specialty. So for example, internally, it's important to involve everyone because the salespeople, the BD team will understand the financial initiatives or incentives as well. And they will know where a company would like to invest their time, effort, and money. Operations, for example, the operations department will prioritize correctly and make sure that you allocated your time based on how much also they paid, so that you're not working, for example, 2 months on something and they're only paying you 5,000 euros, for example. Well, depending on what you're working on. You'll also have the medical team. So we're not experts on the medical content, so it's important to involve them. The legal team, all the regulatory compliance that healthcare deals with. And the engineers that make sure that the data is secure, all the sensitive data is secure, and the designers that adhere to all the usability standards. So it's important to really involve everyone in your company or even externally. And it's also important to be prepared. And last week, actually, I was in a meeting, and a client meeting, and this is when I also realized something. They all ask you the same questions. And so I've decided to start a checklist. And it's the first time when I finish it, then I could share it with you. It involves things like, for example, they all ask for where do you store your data? Are there any third party involved? They ask you about translations, for example. So they're always the same questions. So just have them ready or have them prepared, have the answers prepared, or have your questions prepared, and also manage their expectations early. So it's always good to tell them in advance that you won't be able to deliver by a certain date. And the 5th and last point is embrace regulatory compliance. I mean, that's you cannot do a health talk without talking about regulatory compliance. I feel like it's the unavoidable topic, and it's not going anywhere. So we might as well like it and embrace it. And regulatory impacts your business. So it will limit your product, it will define your product, and whether it's HIPAA or the ISO or GDPR, for example, it will help you design your product. It will give you those limitations that will help you design your product. And it's important, in order to be certified, to document early, but not only to document early, but also to document in parallel. What really worked with Medicus when we did the CE mark for Ecoviv is that we were documenting in parallel. Everybody was working in parallel. Legal was working in parallel with design, in parallel with engineers. Definitely the first time that I've worked like this. So what's next? The things that I would like to do at Medicus is to take more data-driven decisions, to conduct more user testing, define the whole picture with OKRs, prioritize ruthlessly, and say no more often. So I feel like we always need to say no more often, probably all of us. And embrace, and so in conclusion, then one, find your own Agile, stop designing, have more trust in the business strategy, continuously talk with your stakeholders, and embrace regulatory compliance. This is all I have for you today, and I will give you the checklists. Once I have the checklist, and I will share the link to this presentation with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Noelle. And we already have a question from Florine. Would you like me to read it, or do you want to read it?
I will try and get the chat.
Oh, I can read it in the meantime. So when do you start a new product? Do you get assigned a team full-time? What profiles are in that team?
Mm-hmm. So when I first started, I had one product and like my own team working on something. But when we had to pause and we developed three products in 3 months, every time I had a different team.
So I think that all answers your question, Florine.
What profiles are there? Still the second part of the question. So what profiles are in that team? So in that team, we'll have a designer, or if it depends on how big the project is, or I'll be the designer of the team. We'll have a backend engineer, a front-end engineer. We'll have, or maybe two of them, a scrum master. We'll have a tech lead, a medical lead, and a legal person assisting us as well. I hope that answers.
Can I ask out loud, or should I write it down?
Of course.
So I have a question. I was always curious about the health industry. I have not much contact except as a patient, but you've been through different industries that you can compare with others as well. So how would you rate the technical competence level? Basically, how good are their developers and product people and so on, compared to the crazy startups doing anything?
What do you mean, the technical competence? Like
So there's this preconception that the more corporate you go, or the more established you go, the less technically competent people would be. It's not necessarily true in probably in most cases, but you still have this.
I wouldn't say that, but
prejudice.
I would say in a startup, in a smaller, like when you're a smaller team, people push themselves more, and also it's more fast-paced. So the more you grow and the more corporate you get, I feel like the more people get laid back. And it's not the fact that they're not competent. I think competency, for me at least, that doesn't have to do with the size of the company. I think it's just an attitude that changes. The attitude of someone that works in a startup is already fast-paced entrepreneur, wants to like give everything. So actually, even if you're a junior engineer, for example, you would give it your all. In a corporate company, you're more likely to take your time, to talk to maybe your lead, to be more laid back. So I would say that's for me in terms of technical competence.
You're absolutely right. Let me rephrase the question. So, what about the health space? Do you find people being in that corporate mood, or
no,
faster than others?
No, in both Ada and Medicus, it's not corporate. I'd never felt like it was a corporate environment. And at Ada, we reached 250 employees, and at Medicus, we're 150. So it's not a small startup of 40 people, and it is not corporate. Actually, not at all for me.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. The second question that I see is difference of having work as PM in startup environment and big company. That I feel like we need a full talk on this. So in a startup environment, it's definitely more fast-paced, or at least not more fast-paced, but more, it is more fast-paced, and you do more mistakes, but you're willing to do more mistakes because you always have the excuse that you're in a startup environment. In a big company, I feel things take more time as well. So as a PM in a big company, so I used to work at Google, I wasn't like a product manager there, but you have to go through so many people and so many layers, which delays everything. And it takes so much time to actually get approval. It gets so much time to actually push something. And when you're a PM in a startup environment, you can easily talk to everyone. You can easily talk to the CEO. You can easily talk to your stakeholders, to the BD team, and everything moves faster, in my opinion. So that would be for me the main difference. I hope that answers your question, Denise. Does your team prototype a demo of new products for testing prior to building? And how do you and your stakeholders define the opportunity for a new product? So for the first part, does your team prototype a demo of new products for testing? So it depends on the case. So for example, and right now I'm working on a fourth product where I will be prototyping a demo first. However, the product that I've worked on in the last 2 weeks, not at all. There was what I did is a wireframe that we did confirm, like I showed the wireframe to the stakeholders, but it wasn't a proper prototype. And what we've done is that whilst I was doing the wireframes, I actually had the acceptance criteria, the list of acceptance criteria, and the engineers in parallel to me designing were already starting to build the backend. But they built the backend in a modular and also Lego style. And even in terms of UI, so what they did is they put a button in the top left. They put really all the elements that were needed on the screen in random places on the screen until I finished my wireframes. And then I just took them through it, and we literally played like puzzle and saying like this here, this down, this up. And if you have a design system, or not a design, just a system that they're using or a template that they're following, or like React Native or something like a database, or not database, sorry, like a system that they're using, then things go faster as well, because you can just point to what to use, which component to use. And the second part is, and how do you and your stakeholders define the opportunity for a new product? To be very honest with you, given that my whole presentation is about being honest, right now it's being very much based on what the client comes with. And I feel like in a lot of companies, it's like this, but we don't really admit it. And we would love, obviously, for it to be from user feedback. We would love for it to be based on users primarily. But the reality is that it's mainly the opportunity for a new product comes from a new client, or something that the BD team heard a lot. So if they heard in a lot of meetings that, oh, this is the next thing that people are interested in, then we would directly try to put our hands on it. And I would say that that's mainly it. Or, for example, if we have grants that we're applying for, so not accelerated programs, but grants. So if they're giving, for example, the EU was giving around 5 million euros for someone that would develop something in Corona, then this would define the opportunity of a new product, and we would build it in order to get the grant, for example. How do you manage? I hope that answers your questions, Eric. Yes? Okay, thank you. Valerie, so how do you manage budget? Do you get approvals from the client before each sprint starts? T&M or fixed cost? Could you tell me what T&M is? I feel like maybe I should know, but I'm not really sure. Time and material, thank you. So to manage budget, it's not before each sprint, no. We don't have a budget for every product specifically. For example, now for the pregnancy app, we are doing usability testing, and because we know we're going to do usability testing, then we're trying to allocate budget for incentives for people. But otherwise, we don't. Or do you mean budget more specifically for with the employees and all of that? So how much budget we want to allocate in terms of when you bill per hour? No, we don't really have something like that. We don't really get approvals from the client before each sprint. How much client will eventually pay? So what, I don't know if that would answer your question, but what we make sure to have is to have an MOU or a letter of intent. Maybe that, so either they're going to say it's like the letter of intent as in they're going to pay for something, or we say that they pay 50% of it before, but we don't really get approvals from client or anything like that. If there are change requests, the budget will raise. No, we don't really do that unless if it's because we're not working as an agency. We're still, even though we are creating 3 different products in 3 months, we're more of like a product company. So we're not, if they change requests, it depends how big the request is, then we would bill it in a different way. So we would extend the time of the deadline, and yeah, probably the budget might rise, but it doesn't happen very often unless they decide to really change something big. I hope that answers your question, or did you have more things to add? I'm not sure I answered your question as maybe not as well as you were hoping. Okay. Salwa, do you do quantitative market research? Do you find the product market fit instead of conducting qualitative UX research? So actually, Salwa, again, I'm being really honest today. So in terms of quantitative market research, yes, we send surveys and we do ask, we did do multiple actually market research. The problem is that you don't get a lot of people to sign up. It's a little bit hard, and it's one of the challenges. I haven't been long enough at Medicus to know how many they've done and if they've had like really successful ones before. In the last 6 months, I know that we have ran market research, but we would get like 13 responses sometimes, which is not enough. I personally prefer qualitative research because I can get more out of it as well. Quantitative market research requires a lot of which questions you're asking and how to phrase them, and in order to get the right information. Salwa, does this answer your question, or would you like me to elaborate on something more? Used to make data-driven decisions. Yes, I'll send the links to Mirella. Maybe you can share it later for the tools. So because we're starting to use we will use new tools to record, but in terms of getting the data, we use Amplitude. This is like the quick answer that I could give you. And we do have also Google Analytics as well. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you, Valentin.
Thanks a lot, Noelle and Elvira. As for the ones with us on YouTube, we are going to close the stream soon, and look forward to seeing you at our next event. So we have one each Tuesday until September. And now I'm going to stop the live stream and officially start the breakout session where we can just chat freely.
Thank you.